na 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 na. I'm gonna make a change for once in my life. Katie Marie, you better get all you can of her. She's gonna be gone for a couple of months.
Wow. It doesn't get any better than that when we can come in on a Sunday morning and hear heartfelt, honest, rich, beautiful, moving music like what we're hearing this morning. Thank you both. Thank you both. So, yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about honoring the human condition. And when we do that, what we find is that we get to look at it through a slightly different lens than that of the spiritual. I'd like to start by bringing greetings from Tony, who's in San Francisco. And rumor has it he's going to bring a little cool weather back with him. I think there's a cold front coming in later this week. So what I do know about this whole idea of the human condition is that we've all been through a variety of things in our lifetimes. We've all had the opportunity to experience a number of events. And this particular morning, I'm going to share a couple with you. You see, when I was 2 years old, my father moved to Saudi Arabia for work. By the time I was 4, my family had moved 4 different times. And my dad was a first-generation American who grew up with very little on land that his father homesteaded in Wyoming. So by the age of 4, I was living in a completely different place, the foreign country of Louisiana. And for my parents, it was a complete awakening because they had grown up in Omaha and in Douglas, Wyoming, and Omaha, Nebraska. So as we go through this process, what I also noticed is that in reflection, by the time I was 9, I'd lost my childhood home to a hurricane, 5 feet of flood water, and I had walked through a host of other things, including my loving mom's diagnosis of schizophrenia. So this is where we get to notice that we can begin to strengthen our resolve in many ways. To be human is what we're all doing in this moment. It's considered by many to be the sole contract we signed before we came into this life. And I'll offer this, that the human condition is defined by the characteristics, key events, and situations which compose the essentials of human existence, such as birth, growth, emotionality, aspiration, conflict, and mortality. So it's all of those things rolled into one. And these are the components of our incarnate lives. The human condition is the stuff of our very existence in the physical realm. As we walk the spiritual path, we may begin to see this human experience as less than the truth of who we are. For one perspective, yes, that is true. For our true nature is eternal and of God, the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent oneness, the all in all. And we might even find ourselves distancing our lives from this human experience as we gain a deeper connection with our own divinity. Things like the death of a loved one may be handled with redirection, such as choosing to focus on the new life that they're having rather than on our own sadness and sorrow. Well-meaning friends might offer words like he or she is in a better place. I know we've probably all heard that. Or a metaphysical offering might be, we know the truth about them. Yet, there's our humanity. We have been blessed in many ways in our lives, and one of the blessings I've had is to serve as a prayer chaplain and trainer for almost a dozen years. I served as a licensed Unity teacher specializing in pastoral care for nearly 10 years, and during most of that time, I have served as a spiritual counselor. So I have walked alongside many people. I'm currently working with Interfaith Action of Central Texas in the refugee program. And that's another heart-opening opportunity. So when we choose to ignore, avoid, deny, or negate, or otherwise disregard any of our human experiences, we don't have the opportunity to move forward. What we have is instead a place where we feel ourselves perhaps entrenched in the past. So, to put it simply, there is no spiritual bypass for the human condition. And that being said, we can look at some of the tools that we have to support us along the way. You see, some of us seem to instinctively know how to support one another in grief or to grieve ourselves. And right now, when we tune into the news, we hear, just in the last couple of weeks, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, famine, ostracization. The list is incredible of what is going on in the world. And yet, we can only address what is going on within each one of us. We know this to be true. And like many, my own dark nights of the soul led me to this work. My various life experiences have actually supported me in an ever-deepening understanding of this process of change, grief, and loss. When we're experiencing life-changing events, our bodies are going to feel stress, and we may feel that the limbic brain is beginning to be in control, that flight or fight. You know, the idea of flight comes to us when we find ourselves in that moment where we feel we have to do something. We're constantly in motion, whatever it is, to avoid thinking about what's going on. Or perhaps we're fighting. We might be angry with a fellow family member, or we might even be angry with God. And while these are not actually leaning into the grief, they're a part of the process of moving forward in our grieving, because they are beginning to get some of it up and out of ourselves. I'd like to share with you a little bit of the work of Sheryl Sandberg. She is the chief operating officer of that little-known company called Facebook. She puts it together in a book that she wrote entitled Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. And she gives us 3 tools that we can use and identify in building resilience. And the first one that she identifies is personalization. When we're finding ourselves in the trap of personalization, what we're doing is we are taking whatever's going on in this outer world like it's about us. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I created the earthquake in Mexico. You see the difference? It happened. Mother Earth chose to do what she did. And ours is to respond the best way we can. And what happens as well when we find ourselves experiencing personalization is that we feel a lack of confidence, a lack of ability to respond. The antidote, if you will, to this is to begin to notice if we're apologizing for things we didn't do, and to stop, and to begin to take tiny steps, whatever those steps might be, in order to begin to feel a sense of accomplishment. When we're in deep grief, getting out of bed, showering, and getting dressed may be the most we can do that day. And that is what is important, to take those little steps. And the other piece that she shares is pervasiveness. This is when we feel that it's everywhere, that this situation is incredibly overwhelming. And the antidote to this is to begin to gain perspective. We might ask ourselves, or we might invite a beloved friend to ask us the question, if I came to you, or if someone else came to me with this situation, what would I tell them? What would I say? How would I respond? Because then it's no longer about me, but we can take 1 degree of separation and see how we could respond for someone else. And the third thing that she shares is permanence. We begin to feel that this is always going to feel this way, and we are never going to feel better. Anyone know the idea behind always and never? Yeah, it's sometimes, we shift that language to sometimes or lately. and the window of opportunity begins to open yet again. You see, Cheryl wrote this book to share at the opening a life-changing event that she had. She and her husband and another couple were vacationing in Mexico when her husband died suddenly. Her husband and the father of their 2 young children was no longer there. And life as she knew it had changed. And she realized that she needed to do something about how she was responding to the world. So she offered this for other people as she walked her own path. And when we develop resilience in our lives, it offers us an alternative route when loss occurs, when we're able to bounce back from the daily challenges. Traffic. Anyone notice I-35 was busy this morning? Or perhaps another idea would be a shipping delay. Any of those little things that niggle us during the day can just be water off a duck's back, and they don't need to be a concern once we have built a sense of knowing that we can be grounded in a sense of peace. And later, when the big things come up, we are better equipped to respond, to show up in that particular situation, whatever it might be, and to respond from a sense of peace, or at least from a sense of knowing this is not going to last forever. There tends to be a social pressure around the world not to grieve. And especially in first world countries, we sort of put it at the back. We don't allow that to be a part of who we are in many cases. And we find that grief becomes a whisper rather than an actual presence for us. And I offer these words from Scripture. The Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5 in Matthew, begins this way. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. And the second beatitude that we read is, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Jesus wasn't saying, "Blessed are those who dance, for they will know joy." He was speaking to the human condition in this particular beatitude. He was saying that not only will we be able to mourn, but he was also saying that comfort is forthcoming. So as a community, this is something we get to do for one another. We get to show up for one another. And we get to pay attention to the world around us. When we see that someone is suffering, we can talk about what is evident and not being verbalized. For what ours is to actually be the friend who speaks about the pain. The friend who gives the pain a place to go. Because silence increases suffering. Not the silence that we practice in meditation, but the silence that doesn't allow a place of escape, a place of routing for whatever's going on in our lives. You see, it takes courage to do this. And this courage is not just overcoming whatever fear we may have about stepping into that truth. This courage is choosing to step out of our comfort zone. So our question need not be, how are you? Because this particular question is so broad that the average person who is mourning does not have enough bandwidth to answer it. We might choose to scale it down and simply ask, how are you today? How are you in this moment? How are you right now? Because that is a manageable question, one that allows the person who is grieving to have some control over the response rather than going into a complete mystery about what to say. And often what happens when we know that someone is experiencing a loss, we find ourselves thinking, okay, I need to pick up the phone and call them. Or I need to send them a card or do something, or whatever it might be, bring them a meal. And our brain begins to rationalize. And when we rationalize, what we find is that we're beginning to talk ourselves out of it. Oh my goodness, their family's with them this week, and I really don't want to interrupt that. So then it comes up later. And what happens later is that we remember, oh, we haven't called this person to let them know we care. And then we rationalize one more time and we say, oh, it's too late. Now, I'm going to say probably no one in here but me has ever done that, but I just want to suggest that if we're considering showing up for one another, follow our fifth unity principle. Knowing these things is not enough. We must live them. And step into that action. Take that action. Make that call. Each person experiences grief in a unique way. And when someone we know is grieving, it is not ours to say that they will be okay. Do we know that that's the truth? Absolutely not. Ours is to say, I am here with you now, and holding space and being the very best friend I can possibly be. That's all we need to do. We don't even have to say anything other than that. And they don't need to tell their story, because to choose to hold sacred space is to allow them the opportunity to speak if they choose, or to be silent. And ours is to tell the truth. Grieving and loss are difficult human experiences. It's what we do. Ours is to meet our friend and others right exactly where they are. We show up for them and we pay attention to what is going on. And then, when the time is right, we respond in love. From our heart of hearts, we know what is ours to do. And we may simply say that we can see they are suffering. Acknowledging this fact gives them permission to grieve. And like Khalil Gibran, we may realize that pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses understanding. And we can take that quote even further and realize that we need not understand a thing, because that liberates us to be able to see beyond what this pain is and to just know that it's seriously all right to feel like this. So another piece is showing up doesn't sound like call me if you need anything. Back to the bandwidth. The person who is in deep grief doesn't have the bandwidth. So what we can do is to notice. We might drive by their home and see that the lawn needs to be mowed. So what we could offer is a choice. I can be at your home on Saturday morning to mow your yard at 8 or 9, which is better. You're meeting a need right where it is, and you're offering them a choice of the time in which it can be met. And that kind of response, that type of connection, that way of choosing is one that will empower them. It can be about taking the kids to a soccer game. It can be about picking up food for the family. And the choice is going to be as simple as can be. What we like to see is the ability to empower those who are grieving. So when we do this, what we find is we're allowing each other the space to choose and choose again. See, when we're in deep grief, quite often we tend to feel a sense of inadequacy, a sense of inability to function. And as a friend, we're giving the other person just a little bit more of their own sense of comfort, their own sense of self-worth. And as I mentioned, I work with refugees through the Interfaith Action of Central Texas. And this particular program is one that allows the people who are coming to this country, who have been perhaps professionals in their home country. They might be lawyers or doctors. They might be skilled in some incredible area and in a very comfortable life where their children are in great schools and getting a wonderful education. And because of a particular belief that has permeated the culture of their homeland, they're no longer able to live there without fearing for their lives. So they become refugees. Many of them travel into camps that are basically in tents. And when they do this, what they find is they're beginning to establish a new normal. This is indigenous to all grief. We're looking at a new normal. And as they do so, sometimes the children aren't able to go to school. They may be out of school for months or even years at a time before they're relocated to another country. And those who come to the United States, we might ask the question, why is a doctor working as a cab driver? This reason is because they don't have the credentialing, they don't have the language skills, and they don't have the pieces that make it possible in this country. So working with those children as well is another opportunity because they're placed in the grade level appropriate to their age, whether they've had the education or not. So I work with language skills and I work with social skills as well in terms of moving into society. And what we find as we do this work is that we're feeling empathy for one another. We can feel empathy. I had a wonderful opportunity this morning to hear about empathy when our beloved Susan spoke about some folks who might be willing to be in reception to even a breakfast taco. So what we know to be true is these opportunities present themselves, however they show up. And we get to look at it from a lens of love. And when we do this, we're not only feeling compassion for one another, but we're expressing that compassion that we already have for ourselves. One of the tools that we can choose whenever we're going through grief is to write. Putting it on the page gets it up and out. And what that does is it begins to move that energy of feeling shut down out into the outer world. Speak with a beloved friend. Share whatever you need to, either by writing it or by putting it out there. Name the feelings. Not I am sad, rather I am feeling sad. We know these tools are part of affirming the truth of who we are. And when trauma leads to self-doubt, we can choose to end our day by simply writing down 3 things we did well. And it could be, as I mentioned earlier, taking that shower and getting dressed. Whatever it is that we did well that day, we can take credit for having done. When we're walking through any dark night of the soul, compassion for ourselves is absolutely necessary. When we hear the news of other beings on this beautiful spaceship Earth who are undergoing unimaginable hardship, we feel compassion for them. Who couldn't hear about the hurricanes, the floods, and the earthquakes without having their heart broken open just a little bit more? Compassion is that mysterious capacity within each of us. And I'll share these words from the Gandhi Foundation for World Peace. Compassion makes it possible for suffering that is not our own to affect us as though it were. It is that instinctive and selfless insight that reveals to us the existence of our own true being in every living creature. Compassion is the tie that binds every human being to each other and to the mystery of creation. It is the common thread of all religions, meditations, and community structures. Compassion does not acknowledge the artificial social, economic, and religious barriers we place between ourselves and others. It acknowledges the common cry of human longings, aspirations, and tragedy. when a reflex reaction causes us to help a stranger with no motivation other than that person is in need, our compassion is in action. This, my friends, is honoring the human condition. Namaste. And let's prepare for meditation. Beloveds, if you have not already done so, I invite you to close your outer eyes and to feel precious Mother Earth beneath your feet. And take in that beautiful, life-giving, nurturing oxygen, breathing in, into your heart, and breathing out that beautiful love into the world. Sweet friends, allow this beautiful gift of life, this wonderful sense of humanity, to be present in your hearts at this moment. As you continue to breathe in through your heart and out into the world. And call to mind in this moment a beloved friend, family member, or pet. Feeling that glow of unconditional love that comes from that wonderful being. Feel your heart filling even more as the image of this beautiful being comes to mind. And as you do so, simply let that fill your heart to overflowing, knowing that in this moment is God. In this moment is peace that passes all understanding. And allow it to rest within you, that beautiful, peaceful love, in a moment of sweet surrender and pure silence.